Okay, so today I've got a Premier to Death Star 2 deck that revolves around the ISB Operations objective and the Executor, and controlling and dominating space. Um, I think that this is, my opinion is, this is the best Premier to Death Star 2 format deck. And I say Premier to Death Star 2, meaning that this is from the very first. These are cards that are from the very first set, going until cards that were made, and I think up until about 1999. The Premier to Death Star, or the Death Star 2 block, which is Death Star 2, Endor, and Special Edition. It was a very interesting block. It really changed the game. I mean, like, I think that, like, the Premier to New Hope era is like a completely different game than Premier to Death Star 2. And then I think that, like, the virtual cards that are made today are, again, is like it's like a completely different game. But this is like, I don't know. There's a lot of people that think that this is the best format. There are so many fun decks you could play that could win. It was there. I don't know. There's a lot of variety, and I'm trying to show some of the decks that were from that time period. We still, people still play these on GEMP, the online way to play. We had an in-person tournament earlier this summer here in the Minneapolis St. Paul area that was a Premier Death Star 2 tournament. Last fall, I played in a tournament that was a Premier Death Star 2 format in the Twin Cities that had a little bit of a twist to it that was really fun. But anyway, I'm trying. I want to be a resource to kind of help people have fun, but also be able to be competitive too. And I don't know if you play online. I think that that's kind of one of the tougher things. There's so many people that play online a lot that are really good. It can be really difficult to get a win sometimes, and that can be really frustrating. But I mean, like I said, I think this is one of the best decks in this format, and if you give it a try, you practice with it a few times, there's a good chance that you will start getting some wins eventually. So the ISB Operations objective, you deploy the objective and then any Coruscant location. And the Coruscant location that we're playing is the Coruscant system. So gives you 2 force, gives your opponent no force, and then they force drain -1 there. So it's good. That's the one you start with. And then let's see. For remainder of game, your characters with ISB, Rebel, or Rebellion in lore are ISB agents and spies and may deploy regardless of the deployment restrictions listed in their game text. Flip this card if ISB agents control at least 2 Rebel base locations, or if 4 ISB agents are on the table. So we're trying to get 4 ISB agents on the table. We don't really worry about I mean, I suppose it's possible, depending on what you're playing against, you might be able to get 2 Rebel base locations, but we don't play them in this deck. Then when you flip it, while this side up, once during each of your draw phases, you may retrieve 1 ISB agent. When you have a non-undercover ISB agent at a battleground, your force drains are +1 there. Battleground site, too, just so you know. And opponent's force drains are -1 at the same and related locations. Flip this card if no ISB agents are on the table. So this objective is not too hard to flip. It's kind of hard to flip back. They have to kill all your ISB agents, which is really difficult. And then there's some nice benefit here with the retrieving of force. If you got one in the lost pile, and then the force drain bonus, and then the opponent force drain -1 is a really nice bonus at the related locations where you have an ISB agent. So, all right, and then let's see. So we start with, of course, prepared defenses to get our 3 effects into play that we want to use. And the 3 effects, there's two. Okay, so 2 of these are definitely going to play every time. Mobilization points. The main thing with mobilization points is force generation is increased at docking bays. And then once per game, you may take Kurita, Wakamui, Gaul, Kuet, Rendili system, or Executor in hand. So those first 5 are all systems, and then the Executor is obviously the Executor ship. So we're always going to get the Executor. The first thing we're going to do in the game after we get the effects out, the objective out, get the effects out, is we're going to go get the Executor out of our deck and put it into our hand, so you can get it right away if you don't already draw it. None of those other systems are not in the deck. Then we've got Imperial Rest Order. What that does is there's some nice things. Unique Imperial's ability less than 3 or 4 forfeit +2, which is great. But the main thing is once during your deploy phase, you may deploy 1 docking bay from your reserve deck and reshuffle. So This is the card that's going to help you get some docking bays. And then most often, the effect that I start with is something special planned for them. And really what this does is it makes, if your opponents want to move away from one of your Star Destroyers, it requires them to use +2 force. It also has a nice benefit of, if they retrieve force with an interrupt or effect, that card is placed out of play. And, you get a lot of people that use On the Edge in particular to retrieve a lot of force. That helps that interrupt get out of there. All right, so when you start off the game, this is kind of the tricky part. You want to be able to get out other systems, and you got to have a good way of doing that. And the way to do it is Commander Merrick. When he is present with a Scomp link, once during each of your deploy phases, you may deploy one battleground system from your reserve deck. So docking bays have Scomp links. Executor has a Scomp link. It's this little icon right there above the 15. That is a Scomp link. So if he's at a site where there is that icon, that Scomp link, each turn you can go get a battleground system out of your deck. Now, how do you get him out of there? So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4 Imperial Commands. Imperial Command goes and gets an Admiral or General. Commander Merrick is not an Admiral or General, so the good thing is we've got Admiral Piet, and he does let you go once per game take an Admiral's Order or any commander into hand from reserve deck. So if we don't draw, I mean, the best possible thing is we draw Merrick in our opening hand. That's always great. But if we don't, which usually we're not, hopefully we're going to get either Piet or we're going to get an Imperial Command in our hand. If we get an Imperial Command, we're going to go get Piet right away, get him in our hand, deploy him, and then use him to go get Merrick. And sometimes you might not, you're not going to be able to do this on turn 1. A lot of times, hopefully by turn 2 you're doing it. Usually you don't generate enough force on turn 1 to be able to do it on turn 1 anyway. But hopefully, yeah, like I said, hopefully on turn 2, if you don't get any of these cards in your opening hand, you're probably just going to draw up until you do get one of those cards, because you really need to get those. You really need to get those systems out in order to get enough force generation. So we got the 2 docking bays here. We got Executor docking bay. This is the one where you're gonna hopefully use the most. It's got a force icon on your side and none on their side. So you put it out there and put Piet on it and get that force bonus from the effect, and then get Merrick out, and then you're hopefully gonna move them onto the Executor once you get the Executor out. And then we've also got the Endor docking bay, and this is really mostly for battling. It's in here to be a site where you may want to get a guy down to avoid things like battle plan and battle order, or just do force drains. So that's the one kind of battleground site. Okay, so systems, we got Fondor. Now what Fondor does is Executor deploys -5 here. If you occupy, all the opponents' growing Corvettes are -1 and deploy +1, which really isn't a big deal. But Executor deploys -5 here, so you're hopefully going to get this out and then deploy Executor, which will help you get Executor out pretty quick. Now, here's one of the things: if your opponent controls Fondor, you may not deploy Executor. So you want to be careful about getting that system out. And hopefully, you're going to put it out the same turn that you're going to deploy Executor. Is kind of the goal. We got Kessel, gives you 2 force and your opponent 1 force. And then it helps with if light side is playing Kessel, it takes away that the light side Kessel gives them a force drain, so they can force drain you for 3 at Kessel, and that's bad. And then we got Endor, 2 for you, 2 for them. That's really the main thing. If somebody's playing an annoying deck like Menace Fades, this might be one of your best, which Menace Fades takes away force drain bonuses, so this might be the system that you want to control the most because they'll give you the biggest force drain. Kashyyyk is great. It's the system that lets you force drain +1 there. So this one gives you 2 force, gives them 1 force, and as long as nothing's messing with you, you can force drain for 2 here also. So those are the systems. We got some extra Star Destroyers in here. We got 2 Death Squadron Star Destroyers. They're great because they are immune to attrition less than 4. In particular, they also deploy -2 to the same system as Executor, so they can be a little bit cheaper to deploy for their size. And then we've got Dominator, and yeah, nice thing about Dominator is the permanent pilot is ability of 2, so that's really good. Isn't it kind of weird how a Dominator and a Death Star Squadron Star Destroyer have the same picture? It's kind of weird. Anyway, Boba Fett and Slave 1 is just good on his own. Zuckuss and Misshunter, like, probably the best starship possibly in the whole game, as far as dark side anyway. Bosk and Houndstooth, really good really good starship also. If you put Bosk down with it, nice thing about Bosk and Houndstooth is it lets you it adds a battle destiny, so you can either be out there on his own, or if you put him down with like the Executor or something like that, you might be able to draw 2-3 destiny depending on what else you got there. All right, so now let's get into our ISB operatives. We got 6 Outer Rim Scouts, and I don't know, they're just basically in here because they're ISB operatives. They're non-unique too, and there are a couple things in here that are good for that. So they add 2 to the power of a starship. Yeah. If they're piloting an independent starship, they add 3. Draw battle, that's not able to otherwise. I don't know, that's not a big deal. But there's 6 of these guys in here. They're cheap to get out. And again, they're ISB agents. I'm trying to get 4 of them in play. 1 Darth Vader in here. This is a Darth Vader we got. He's just, Lord of the Sith is good against decks that are playing other small guys that you can, choke, get rid of. So he's just, he's good for battling without having to have a lightsaber in the deck. Grand Moff Tarkin. If he's with Vader, of course, cancel that destiny. Captain Jonas is a pilot, but he's also an ISB agent, so counts as the ISB agent. Captain Goddard also counts as an ISB agent. Ozzel, also an ISB agent. Evax, ISB agent. Chiranu, not an ISB agent, but one of the best cards in the deck, because when piloting a Star Destroyer at a battleground system, he adds 1 to your force drains, and at each other battleground system controlled by a Star Destroyer within 2 parsecs of Chiranu. So this is one of the great things about this deck, and I think this is one of the reasons. So this kind of sums up one of the reasons why I think this is one of the best decks. There really just aren't any bad matchups against this deck. Even somebody who's got a really strong ground deck, like Prophet, for example, that uses the you can profit by this objective, which is a very popular light side objective, played in a lot of Premier Death Star 2 decks. You can race them, and especially because of Chiranu, because you can do some big. You get Chiranu out on a Star Destroyer, you can do some big force drains in space. Okay, and then we've got this guy. This guy is very interesting. So he's a droid. He's also an ISB agent. And the reason that he is in here, four deploy seems pretty expensive. He's power +1 at Mahdi with Mahdi or Yularen. Deploy +1 for all opponents' droids. So gosh, it doesn't seem like he does a whole lot, and he's pretty expensive, right? Well, he is an ISB agent, and why he is so good in this deck is because if you're flipped, there's that part about the objective that makes all your opponent's force drains -1 if you have an ISB agent present at a location, and all their related locations, the force drains are also -1. So, like if you're playing against Prophet, for example, they might have 3-4 Tatooine locations out. You play this guy down on one of them, he just sits there. He's a droid, no ability. They can't attack him unless they have a card that allows them to attack a droid. He just sits there, and all their force drains are going to be -1 on Tatooine. Huge. They pretty much have to get rid of him, or they can't. Like Prophet just can't win because you're going to force drain them so fast in space. Anyway, really good card. One of the, in certain situations, one of the best cards in the deck. U3PO, this helps you block force drains. You're not going to be the strongest at sights or on the ground, so that's why we got some of these force drain blockers in here. So U3PO blocking force drains. And then Den of Thieves is an effect. Once per turn, you may cancel a force drain anywhere. So that counts for systems too, which is really nice. Some of the decks that like to mess with you in space just by running away and stuff like that, this is really good. So it works for Outer Rim Scouts in particular. You can put Outer Rim Scout on him to cancel a force drain, and then you can still deploy it on the next turn. So then there's a lot of effects in here just to kind of help against other decks. So we got this is like in There Is No Try and Impressive Enforcement are the anti-sense and alter cards. So if you're playing against somebody that's playing a lot of senses and alters, you want to get one of these out. Maybe if you're if you're playing against if you're playing against Prophet, for example, they do play some senses. You may want to start with this There Is No Try instead of one of those other effects that I talked about. You cannot hide forever. Nice thing about this one is it lets you go get it lets you go get a Endor or Death Star 2 effect that deploys for free. So you might even start with this one and get out, depending on what you're playing against. Resistance is good against insert cards in particular. So it's one of those cards you come up, you might just want to get it out there because somebody may play a surprise insert card, and it limits the loss for insert cards to 2. And there are some wicked insert cards in this format. And like I said, the game might be going well, and then all of a sudden somebody plays an insert card in their deck and just, pounds you for, I don't know, 6-8 force loss or something like that. Resistance will lower that to 2. Imperial Decree. Let's see. Whenever you control any one planet, site, or 2 systems, the effects of Revolution, all opponents' force drain bonus everywhere canceled. So this will get rid of their force drain bonuses. Things like lightsabers that give them +1 to force drains are no good as long as you control 1 site and 2 systems. So that's just in there to help with that. Battle Order. Unless people, this gets rid of free force drains if people don't occupy a battleground site, and a battleground system. There are definitely decks that do not play space or very much space at all, and this is a great card to play against those decks. Again, Prophet, for example. A lot of Prophet decks do not play any space. You can play this down, and it'll slow them down on their force draining. Security precautions, really, it's good against hidden base. If you probe opponent's the hidden base objective, which is very popular. If you probe opponent's hidden base objective, they lose X force, or X equals 15 minus number of systems on table. And then the other thing is, you also take no damage where there's a probe card, which is handy. And then the other thing is force generation is +1 here, so you can put this down on a site and you just generate an extra force if you get it right away early in the game. We got lateral damage, and I've lost R2. Lateral damage is like just a ridiculous card sometimes. You deploy it on a system, target a starship, and that target's power and forfeit are 0. So like somebody's playing home 1, and they don't have Major Hashem out. The nice thing about Major Hashem is Major Hashem cancels lateral damage, so you want to be careful of that if you see him. But otherwise, you play this on their starship, and their power and forfeit equals 0. And yeah, that can win you the game sometimes. We got I lost R2. If you get this down, a starship's hyperspeed is 0, so you can stick a starship at a system where they can't move, and then you stick them at a system they can't move, and then you go get them with your big star destroyers like Executor, and hopefully do a big overflow damage battle. A couple of Twilight Advisors to go get effects out. Monarch and Masterful Move. Monarch, of course, if people are drawing a lot of cards in their hand, Monarch is great. And I love Monarch. I love Monarch. Sometimes you play it, and it's just it can pretty much win you the game sometimes. So, that's why that's in there. Masterful Move helps you go get Monarch, and then it's also a Destiny 6. So you can also play this to get Monarch, but you can also play it to get yourself a Destiny 6 card in your deck to help you draw it in a good situation like a battle or something like that. Control cancels a sensor alter, and then also cancels cancels a force drain. So sometimes this works against sense and alter, and sometimes you just use it to cancel the force drain. Avacyn Ornament lets you go get a Outer Rim Scout, and it's a Destiny 5 interrupt. So good card to have in there. And then I've got two Imperial or Admiral's Orders. This one, we're in attack position now, is great because it lets you pilots deploy -1 and admirals deploy -2 aboard a capital starship. So it really makes pilots cheap to deploy, and then it also adds 2 to immunity of a starship, or 4 if they don't already have immunity less than 4. And then sometimes you might be able to get Commander Merrick down on a site, and then opponent loses 1 force for each battleground site your general commander controls that is related to a system you occupy. And then battle deployment. Nice thing about battle deployment is it lets you go, well, if you're playing against one of these decks that uses a lot of small starfighters, like a lot of X-Wings or a lot of Y-Wings, it's great because it makes each of their little dinky starfighters even dinkier by giving them all power -2. And then, it's sites related to systems you occupy. They can only draw 1 destiny. And then during your deploy phase, you may deploy 1 combat vehicle from your reserve deck. And so there's a lot of good things with this Admiral's Orders. Both these Admiral's Orders, there's a lot of good things. You can, depending on your situation, One's going to be better than the other. That's why I have one of each in there. And then there's two, lastly but not least, there are two AT-ATs in the deck, and Blizzard 2 and Tempest 1. And I mean, a lot of times they're kind of the all-stars of the deck because there's so many decks that play so many, like Obi-Wan with lightsaber and Luke with lightsaber, the cards with the permanent weapons on them. And I mean, the nice thing about vehicles like this is they can't hit your characters that are inside these vehicles with lightsabers and weapons. So, yeah, these guys can be the all-stars of the deck sometime. Hope that helps. Hope you have fun. Try this deck out. May the force be with you.